master's role in our lives is that of one who initiates the dormant forces of evolution. I have been speaking about this to some of you separately and given you my idea that the human stage of life is something like a intermediate stage in the process of evolution. We are told that life began in the what they call the ooze, in the original oceans of this earth, millions of years back. And that life, which began in the oceans, developed progressively until it resulted in the human being. Both science and mysticism agree on one thing, that the human being is the highest form of evolution so far. But the human being forgets the two words so far and thinks that this is the peak of evolution, which is a gross mistake. Now it is said that the original life form evolved up to the present human form automatically, in the sense that it did not have to think and do something. The price that it had to pay was, of course, the enormously long duration in time that it took. Now, as far as the evolution beyond the human life is concerned, science has no answer, of course. But spirituality says, and our master has also said, that once the human evolves into the next stage, then again evolution is automatic. So we come to this interesting fact that an enormous level of evolution is there below us, and an equally enormous levels are there beyond us, but in between we are stuck in some sort of a layer where evolution has to be by our wish. It is almost as if it is a trap between two separate regions, and from this trap only the best go up. So if you think of it that way, it is also a region where selective evolution comes, the selection being done by us ourselves when we choose to evolve. So it seems as if we have been given an opportunity to decide whether we will evolve or not, because after we cross the human level, nature does not want unwilling participants anymore. Only willing participants are accepted. So in that sense, it is an area of selection from which only those who are willing to evolve are taken up further. The rest remain and keep going round and round. So this whole question of cycles of birth and death, rebirth as we call it, is nothing but going round and round until the desire in us comes to go up and we leave it forever. Now, if we are left to ourselves, we may never know what is possible, what we can achieve, what are the goals that lie before us. Because like the frog in the well, we can imagine that is our whole universe. I think it is for this reason that the master comes. It seems the master comes to tell us, don't think this is all. However wonderful it may be, this is not all. I represent something which is higher, far higher than you can ever imagine, and I have come to you to show you what that is, so that you may aspire for it and seek my help in achieving it. This is very common. I mean, it's not difficult to understand, because once somebody does something, everybody else tries to do the same thing. See, so long as the Everest was not climbed, it was thought it was impossible. But the moment one man climbed it, everybody started climbing it. It is as if the first man who does it shows us what is possible, and the rest are able to achieve it. In that sense, the powers of evolution are already within us. It is not that we don't have the requisite powers. It is only the need to express the powers in the right direction that exists. Therefore, I have never been able to accept the need for power to evolve. And it is one of the most beautiful concepts in Sahaj Marg that the transmission is described as forceless force, powerless power, things like that. It is necessary to bear this in mind, because we find today so many systems treating or dealing with power. And of course, the most important is in India, the Shakti path, as we call it, you see. And it is a well-known fact that most of the aspirants of such systems end up in other things than spirituality. Now, if you look at the possibility of evolution from the human level up to the final destination, there are several levels. And our master has said that if you are liberated, you will have to live in other stages of evolution until you reach the goal. But he has emphasized that it is possible to go to the ultimate goal directly also. So, however high liberation may be, it is not the goal of Sahaj Marg practice. Because as I pointed out to you the other day, if you think of evolution as a tree, there are branches and they remain as branches. And we have the confirmation in our Indian philosophies that even the so-called gods have to come back to human form to achieve their final destination again. This is said very explicitly in all our literature in India. That incidentally is another reason why it is futile to pray to such gods, because they have to come back themselves here. And how are they going to help us? That is why Master has described in Reality at Dawn that these gods are nothing but the functionaries of nature. They are like the people who are in charge of villages, in charge of cities, in charge of even whole countries. But they are there for some time and then they come back as ordinary citizens. So Babuji repeatedly cautions us against the worship of such gods. They are in charge of respective functions, limited functions. And in that function, they are capable. They can do nothing more. Therefore, even if we have to pray, Babuji says, pray to the ultimate, who is nameless, who is formless, who has no qualities, no power, nothing. Now it may appear a little odd that we have to pray to someone who has no powers, but we must remember that one who has power or is powerful can become powerless. That is, he is in a changeable state. Therefore, a God who has qualities, however high or big they may be, is in a changeable condition himself, not in the eternal condition. And the other important fact is that they have themselves come from that eternal source which is nameless, formless, powerless, qualityless. Therefore, our goal is that ultimate, which Babuji calls the center, because then there are no ideas of power and things like that which confuse us. When you speak of a God, we think of powers. When you speak of the center, all these connotations are lost. So coming back to Babuji himself, we have the interesting fact that he was a human being without what we think of as power in any sense. He was not highly educated. He spent probably only 6 or 7 years in school, as he himself told all of us so many times. He did not have the power of money or influence or social position. Nor did he have physical strength. We have all seen him and we know he was a small man, frail, quite weak, often sick. So there was no question of physical powers in the Babu. Before I went to Babuji for the first time, I used to imagine what a master should be. And I am sure we all have had such similar fantasies. So much so that when I first saw him, it was for me quite a disappointment. But later when I thought of it, I understood that it was necessary for him to assume such a form. Because in all human achievement, some power or other is associated with it. Because if you see a man who has built a house or has got a car, people say, yes, of course he can do it, he is rich. Somebody else climbed the Matterhorn or swam the English Channel, you say, yes, of course, he is strong and powerful. So it has become a human, not only an idea, but it is deeply ingrained in us to associate success or achievement with one power or the other that is available to us. Now, we have to be assured that success in the spiritual adventure does not depend on any human powers. Now in Sahaj Marg, it is claimed that it is a system universally applicable which can be practiced by any human being who is willing to practice it. And this means that any human being, irrespective of whether he is educated or not, powerful or not, physically capable or not, rich or not, must be able to achieve it. Actually, it must be practicable by one who has no education, no money, no physical strength, no culture, nothing. And this truth Master showed us in his own person. And I am sure that what I felt, you also would have felt when you saw the Master, that if he can do it, I can also do it. This was precisely the spirit and the confidence that he had to give us, for which reason he had to take that particular way of living, the form that he assumed for himself. So, this was the most important thing. You see that human beings will not undertake anything if they have no confidence that they will not be able to do it successfully. So that was the master stroke of the master. Because if he had come as a tall man, rich, powerful, influential, we would have said, yes, of course he can do it, but what about me? So here we have that phenomenon of what we believe to be the highest, assuming the form of the lowest to guide us to himself. So I think that was his greatest act of generosity. That not only did he come to us as a human being, but he had to come in a form in which he had to suffer so much, just to show us that with all my weakness, with all my suffering, with all my poverty, I am what I am, and this you too can become. The second lesson is to us that if you are to be able to do the work as I am able to do it, you too must be simple. And therefore he says, be simple and in tune with nature. And therefore in his physical and social life, he showed us what the lowest human level of existence is. In his spiritual inner life, he revealed to us what the highest spiritual level can be, and this was meant to lead us to that. Teach us what? Yeah. That being this, you can become that. That is precisely the universal applicability of Sahaj Marg. The second beauty of his teaching is that there is nothing in the teaching which needs any special capacity in us to practice it. If you have to do Hatha Yoga, there are so many physical requirements. If it is Jnana Yoga, you need intellectual powers of an extraordinary nature. If it is Tapasya or ascesis as you call it, then you need enormous endurance of physical conditions which normally human beings don't have. Many systems in the past could only be for the men, the males. And almost all systems of the past and many today also are only for the celibates. And most of them said, go away to the jungle, which means a tremendous renunciation and a courage that an ordinary mortal is not supposed to have when he starts off this practice. Therefore, this very sad and unfortunate fact that although systems have been available from time immemorial, few have been able to practice them because they could not do it. It was not that in the past people were not willing to evolve. It was just that people were unable to undertake these rigorous systems, rigorous disciplines, and therefore these systems failed. What is the use of having systems which we cannot practice? Therefore, I would make bold to say that humanity had to wait for Ramchandra to come to give us a system which all can practice without any difficulty. That means in the past we had the willingness to do it but not the ability to do it. Today we have the willingness and fortunately a system which requires no ability on our part. That is why it is said in Sahaj Marg, and the master has said it so many times, what is the qualification for you to come in Sabhyas? Only your willingness. That brings us to the third most significant and important feature of Sahaj Marg, the role of the Guru. We need no capacities, no qualities, precisely because he has everything that is needed to take us up to himself. It is an important fact that even in the Vedic literature, the disciple is told to go and meditate, and he meditates for 20 years, 40 years, 50 years and comes back to the Guru. He comes back and reports to the Guru what he has discovered by his practice. The Guru says, very good, meditate 20 years more. And this goes on and on, which means that the Guru does very little by way of help and assistance to the disciple. All they did was to say, practice it. Those of you who want to verify the statement only have to look at one of the Upanishads and you will find this is what happens. And one of the most famous stories shows how tragic such a system of teaching can be. Because the story says how one of the Indras, one of the cosmic functionaries, and so-called, a demoniac person, Vritra, both went to a Guru for instruction. And the Guru taught them the body is the ultimate thing because in it is embodied the soul, in it lives the soul, and by it the soul reaches its destination. So the body is the highest. The demoniac person was satisfied. He was a great king. He put on all his jewelries, looked into the well, admired his own reflection and said, yes, the Guru is right. His spirituality stopped there. So you see, the responsibility for practice and progress was on the disciple, not on the Guru. In Sahaj Marg, the responsibility for practice is ours. The responsibility for progress belongs to the master. I don't think that ever before a system has existed of such a nature. And the second factor is that in Sahaj Marg, the master never says good. He says yes, further. This is only the beginning of spirituality. Those of you who have read the master's books, especially towards infinity, you will find at every point he says this is something which even the gods have not achieved, but yet it is the beginning of spirituality. It is a condition which even the gods do not have, but it is only the beginning of spirituality. And those of you who have read the latest publication, Master's Autobiography Volume 2, you will find confirmation of this in almost every sentence of the book. Now, in the beginning in 1965, when I started practice, I was quite discouraged by this. I used to wonder, what is this spirituality which can take you to so much height? And yet it is only the beginning. Where is the end? You see, it is one of the, shall I say, a limiting idea of the human mind that everything must have a beginning and an end. Now, Sahaj Marg is contrary to this very ordinary human idea. It says the beginning is wherever you are, the end is where I am, and that is infinity. Therefore, we have two interesting features. The book is called Towards Infinity, and the second one is that even Laraji is still swimming in the ocean of bliss towards the center. And the third factor shows the tremendous generosity of Master's Master, that as he is swimming towards the center, his spiritual achievement he is transferring back to his successor, our Babuji Maharaj. No, the generosity is not a very important thing. Of course, masters are expected to be generous. Then what is the important lesson that we learn from Lalaji's acquiring spiritual merit which he is transferring back to his disciple? What is the important lesson that we learn? This is something we have to learn very, very thoroughly, that achievement is not related to acquisition of anything. Maybe it is for this reason too that Babuji came without any powers, without any wealth, without any education, because these are also acquired things. So a man can begin this divine adventure owning nothing, possessing nothing, acquiring nothing. And as he grows or as he advances, he acquires things which he is not allowed to keep, he has to transfer back. The most important reason being that any possession leads to egotism, arrogance, pride. And the second truth is they become weights which we cannot take on our swimming. And what is the end? It is a merger in that center which again has nothing, no powers, no qualities, no nothing. So therefore, dear brothers and sisters, in Sahaj Marg, we have a unique system. Any human being anywhere can practice. It needs nothing for it to be practiced except willingness. It offers a practice which is very simple, very easy, and the master takes upon himself the responsibility of taking us to the goal. And this is made possible by the fourth most important characteristic of Sahaj Marg, transmission. Now, we have heard a lot about transmission, that it is the use of the divine energy for the transformation of man and all sorts of funny things about it. They have never convinced me, or rather they have never touched my heart. All of them have a funny idea of conveying something from the master to us. That gives a little misleading picture of Sahaj Marg. Now, what is it that is really transmitted and why? Once when I was alone with master, it was midnight on a very cold night in Shahjahanpur. He was unusually moody and distressed about the progress of Abhyasis. And he casually said something, which at that moment I did not realize its significance. What he said was, people say God is love, and it is true. Yet when God comes to us, we are unwilling to receive His love. So this, later on I understood to be what transmission is. It is the love that God has for us that is transmitted, and it is that love which makes us grow. Answered for me a very important question. Why in Sahaj Marg there is no compulsory discipline? Because love cannot demand or force. Love must evoke. Therefore, even the 10 maxims tell us what to do and leave it to us to do when we have developed sufficient love for the master and for our goal. That is why in Sahaj Marg, I believe we have a system which has a very human guru promising a divine goal in a very human way of achievement. And all these three aspects our master reflects in his existence. was being divine himself. He is in a human form, dealing with human beings, with human love, and raising us to himself. Thank you.